Hey, thanks for tuning in to Between the Lines podcast. I'm Alex Woods, a former ICU nurse and founder of U.S. Legal Nurse Consultants. This show uses medical legal cases to explore judgment, strategy, and decision making. But what we're really talking about is how people think when there isn't a clear answer. The stories come from medicine and law right now, but the patterns, the missteps, and the strategy, it applies everywhere. This is about reading between the lines and knowing what to do with what you find. So let's get into it.
Mean, I've had a unique career. I've had I always joke, I've had like 4 or 5 different careers in the law.
I want to know the story. Yeah.
Yeah, so well, I started as a, court. Well, all right, let me back up. I started wanting to be an entertainment lawyer because I thought that what that meant was you'd be, cruising around Hollywood and having lunch with Tom Cruise. I mean, as dumb as that sounds, it was really what my
Yeah.
mindset. It's like
Totally cool.
I watched Jerry Maguire and I was like, well, I'll be the Hollywood version of that.
Yep.
Came to find out very quickly that their life is just reviewing contracts and in a, ridiculous office building, and it's not very fun. So then I left that and I went on a reality television show for a little while, and it was an NBC show that was short-lived about lawyers. And I was like, well, this is fun, but it's not going to pay me anything. So then I went to the public defender's office, which didn't pay me much either, but it was also super fun. And I was a public defender for a number of years, and then had a third child, kind of unexpectedly, and had to figure out how I was going to pay for all this. And so I went into private criminal defense, and I did that for about 12 years. And then I kind of backed into personal injury because a friend of mine was like, you have to start trying cases in personal injury. And I'm like, what do I need that for? I've got 11 murders under my belt, and I don't care about car wrecks or anything like that. And she was like, well, I'll give you a case. And I'm like, what? I don't know what that means. And she's like, I will give you a case. Whatever you get from it will be yours. I don't want anything. I just want to see you do it. And I was like, well, I didn't understand at the time how generous that was. That's crazy. I mean, this was her case. She'd put costs in, but she was kind of doing anything she could to tempt me with this practice area. And so I took the case and tried it. And it was like we represented this Guatemalan pizza delivery guy who was rear-ended at about 15 miles an hour. And it's one of those examples of you don't know what you don't know. So I didn't know that this case was basically worthless. Like, he had a knee scope as a result, and I liked the guy. His name was Cesar Alescas. I liked him a lot, and so just went in there and like a fucking maniac. I was in there with a, a three-piece suit that was purple and like dressed like a criminal defense attorney. I was yelling at everybody. I was going nuts, and we somehow got like I want to say like a $360,000 verdict. It was in that neighborhood, which was just huge for this, for the time and for this kind of case. And from that, I was like, I got a bigger check than um, I might. I got a bigger check than almost all of my criminal cases at the time. And I was like, all right, I could do this. And, I really liked this guy, Caesar. Maybe there's other clients like him there too, because in criminal defense, there's a weird diminishing return where even if you get someone an acquittal on a not guilty verdict, there becomes this diminishing appreciation return over time, where the person usually spent good money on you. And so they, their first reaction is, oh my God, you're the greatest. Thank you. I'm not going to jail for the rest of my life or prison. And then it's like, what? I did pay you a lot of money. And then it's like, well, I mean, I was always innocent, so anybody could have won that. It becomes this kind of revisionist history until they get arrested again, which usually happens. But in personal injury, as kind of trite as it might sound, it is the opposite. There's just a growing appreciation for what you have done for their life and for their family and alleviated a lot of the suffering that they had once had. And, to the point where my wife and I, we get Christmas cards and flowers and gifts and all this kind of stuff every year from people where we're like, didn't we handle this case like 10 years ago? And like, was it that great of a result? I didn't think so, but they did. And it's very rewarding in that. And I know that sounds, when people were asked, well, why did you become a model? And it's like, well, I became a model to help others. And it's like, no, you became a model because you were gorgeous and it opens doors and pays you a ton of money. Like, so I don't want to sound Pollyanna-ish here, but it is the truth. So, and we're having a discussion, so I'll tell you the truth.
That's right. That's right. So that is probably one of my favorite stories I've heard so far, if not my favorite. So that was your first personal injury case, and then you just went with personal injury after that?
Yeah, so two things were happening at the same time in my
Okay.
life. I had been divorced at that time, and so I'm like in this transition period, and everything's kind of chaotic in your life when you get divorced and you have children. It's not, whether it turns out good or not, it's not a good thing to go through, right? It's very chaotic and stressful. And so at the time, I'm just kind of exploring this new practice area. And I had I reconnect with this girl who I met one time. And she was also a lawyer. I'd met her years ago, like 4 years prior. And she's doing family law. And she had just moved from San Diego to Orange County, and we reconnect. And I thought when I first saw her that it was love at first sight, but it was only like one way. Love at first sight. It was my way to her. And so she's doing family law, and we go out on a date and end up never dating anyone else since. She's my wife. Today we celebrated 11 years ago in May.
Okay.
Uh, but we are together, and she's got family law cases and I've got criminal cases. And then we have this opportunity to also work together and to do something new. And I was like, why don't we just work together instead of, having the most insane office where family law clients are coming in, which are always angry and, bitter and very upset. And then they're sitting in the lobby with criminal defense clients who are scared, but they're frightening people. Like, why don't we do this whole other thing? And she was like, okay, we'll try it, because what do you have to lose if you have this skill set where you can do family law or criminal law? You don't lose anything. You just kind of see if you can do this other thing. And so we did. In the first case we tried, we got a $40 million verdict on a very weird case that was filed on the last day by it was a wrongful death, so it was filed by the decedent's father. And it was filed in pro per on the last day before the statute ran out because he couldn't get a lawyer to take it.
Hmm.
And so we tried this case along with a guy who would later become my partner, Nick Rowley. And it was like this, it was almost like, when the gang of Scooby-Doo gets out of the mystery machine and they go to this town and everything wacky's happening and they're going to solve the mystery. I mean, that's really what it felt like. We were litigating out of our car. We had, two law firms, white shoe law firms on the other side of us. And we were just kicking their ass every day. So it felt good. And then that was when it was like, okay, we're not going anywhere. This is what we're going to do.
That's amazing. Yeah, I looked at your website and stuff, and your wife is gorgeous, by the way.
Yeah,
And
it's cool. Beauty and the Beast, like how this.
what do they say? You married up? Is that what you married up?
Dude, that's not like airbrush bullshit. The real estate agent's photo on the supermarket cart, and then you meet the real estate agent. You're like, that photo was from 20 years ago. And that's actually,
Seriously, that happens all the time.
yeah.
Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, that's an amazing story. And I can resonate with the whole divorce thing. I've recently divorced. I have two children, 3 and 5, and man, not only is it financially taxing, but emotionally, and like you're trying to do right by your kids and everything, and like you're doing the practice. And I'm like, I was in the same boat last year, and it's a hell. And you don't wish it upon your, regardless if it was cordial or not, it's terrible. Like you don't wish on your worst enemy.
Yeah,
So
you're in a storm, in a little dinghy, and if eventually you paddle your way over to the yacht and some warm hot chocolate, that's wonderful. But it doesn't take away the fact that you were in a storm in a little dinghy and you're just trying to survive.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, that experience, and especially with kids, as you know, it there's different lives of that, right?
Mhm.
So there's different iterations. So 10 years from now, you're going to be dealing with consequences and decisions, and positive or negative, that were made, and you're going to go, well, shit, I thought I was out of this. I thought everything was okay. And you're just going to have to draw on your current life and those people around you. And I will say, like, there's been no better draw for me. I mean, I'm uniquely lucky because I'm partnered with my wife. And
Mhm.
some people are like, well, man, like, don't you guys get sick of each other and all this stuff? And I'm like, no, if we did, we shouldn't be married. Like, it's
Yeah, yeah.
we need breaks from one another. Now we have those, but I think the level of understanding. Here's tonight. I have to be in Los Angeles for a CALA trial lawyer of the year vote and installation, and I'll get back to my home in South Orange County around 10:45, which the house is also under construction. There's mouths to feed, dogs to walk, children to clothe and bathe and all that stuff. And I'm not doing any of it. So it helps if you have a partner who's like, I know exactly what he's doing. I know exactly why it fits within the greater context of our life. And then come this Saturday, Angela, whose birthday was October 3rd and is celebrated at plenty, has like a sixth celebration with a bunch of girlfriends. And she's going out to a comedy show and she's going to be gone all day and they're going to be drinking mimosas and I'll be in charge. And I get that as well because I understand her life that is my life as well. So it's a really good balance and trade-off. And I don't say that just because I want to make it happen. It actually happens and it's a blessing.
Oh, that is such a blessing. Love that. Gives I think hope too, just to people to hear like there's another story, there's another chapter of all this. You just
Well, there's a lot of other chapters,
right?
Alex. You'll be all right.
Yeah. All right. So Keith, walk us through one of your most complex cases. And I know a lot of attorneys I've talked to, they're like, I've been doing this for so long, like every case is complex. But what's one that speaks to you? That's one of the most complex ones, whether you lost or won. And then what made it challenging legally or medically? Let's do a medical case, which you do most of.
Okay. Yeah, so I think I was going to give you an option
Okay.
of two cases. Undoubtedly, not even close, the most complex case that I have done are the Monsanto cases, where we're suing Monsanto for PCB exposure,
Mhm.
which is a forever chemical that can hurt you in a million ways. Now, that's so complex that the trials are about 3 months. I've done two of them. There's, I think, 11 of them that have been done by our group. Um, and they're not trials that one attorney can do. They're not trials that two attorneys can do. We usually have one lead for liability and one lead for damages, and then you staff them otherwise. So those are complex and insanely complex and also kind of boring. And if we had 13 days, I could explain to you what happened. Another option in the medical malpractice context was complex because it was really a medical malpractice case that exposed a medical fraud. And that also, it's everybody loves talking about it because it's the penis case. It involves an injury to a penis. And so when you say that, everybody kind of perks up and it's like, well, what? Oh my God, I hear this injury to a penis. What's that about? Um, and So in addition to just being, kind of salacious, it had all of the ingredients of a, strategic decision making that was interesting. What started as a medical malpractice case turned into a fraud case.
Let's talk
Uh,
about it.
sure. So basically, what the thumbnail sketch of this is, our client was 61 years old, had his wife had died by suicide. His oldest son had died. He was going through a very rough patch of his life. He was obese. He had had a stroke. He metabolically, he was just imagine everything that can go wrong metabolically in your body. It was going wrong in his. So he was just a mess, and he wanted to lose weight. So his doctor refers him over to this clinic called the New Male Clinic, and he had thought, well, I'll get some testosterone from them, increase my testosterone levels because these were very low, 61, obese, you could imagine.
Mhm.
And so he goes to them, and what they do, unbeknownst to him, is they're in the business of selling a package, a medical package for you. And it's basically three things. The testosterone they'll sell to you, but the testosterone's really like the loss leader. They don't really make a lot of money off of that. So they have to package it together, and they package it with PRP injections into your penis because, unsurprisingly, just to back up a little bit, testosterone is going to affect you mentally, it's going to affect you metabolically, but it's not going to affect you sexually other than the desire to have sex. So if you have some physical problem with your penis, or you have, an unrelated erectile dysfunction, you can want to have sex, but if that thing doesn't work, it's not going to work. Testosterone's not going to make it work. People think that it does because if you don't have that and you get testosterone, you really want to have sex and you have a working penis, so you can do that. So what they do is they sold him PRP injections, and they sold him a Trimex injection that is injected directly into the penis, and it will give you an erection for a period of time. And it's supposed to last about an hour and a half or so. Now he didn't need any of that, right? And if you had done just kind of a basic analysis of who this guy was, what his medical needs were, he needed to get in shape. He didn't even have anybody to have sex with at that point. And so but there was no analysis or evaluation of that. It was, how do we get this guy signed up for our big package, which is where the profit center is, because the profit center was all in the Trimex injections. And so they show him how to inject it. They give him the antidote because, of course, if you inject it and if the erection lasts longer than 3 hours, we've all seen the commercials, call your doctor, a condition called a priapism is going to result. And a priapism is an erection that lasts longer than 3 hours. And the problem is all of that blood flow to the penis, their blood is flowing in at a rate faster than it's flowing out. And what happens is then, and this is very layperson-y right now. If doctors are listening, they'll go, "Oh my God, that's technically not what happens." I know, I get it. But for lay people, what happens is the blood begins to congeal inside the penis, and it can't be relieved. And then what essentially starts happening in a priapism that lasts too long is the penis starts necrotizing from the inside out. So it starts to die. So they give him this. He has problems with the injection, and without to get too graphic, of course he does, because he's obese, and it's hard to do that when you're obese. He comes back to the clinic. He says, "I'm having problems. I can't inject." They inject him themselves, and then the PA says, "Now go home and show all your friends." And this is importantly, this is on a Friday at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So he goes home, and he still has this erection, and it won't go down. And he's trying to inject the antidote. It's not really working. So he has this. He suffers with this priapism from Friday night to Saturday, which is already way too long. Tissue's dying. Big problems are happening. He goes back to the clinic on Saturday. They're closed. So he waits until Sunday. He's still got this. Now, the tissue inside the penis is dying rapidly. I mean, it was a medical emergency in the middle of the night on Friday. You can imagine he's suffering on Saturday. He's suffering on Sunday. And by Monday, he goes to the clinic. They try to drain the blood, and then they can't. This is way past medical emergency time. They send him with a bandage in his car to drive to the ER in New Mexico, in Albuquerque. And so really, like, a lot of things have gone wrong by this point. And the most, and I think valid question is, why the hell didn't he go to the emergency room? Why didn't he go on Friday night? Why didn't he go on Saturday? Why didn't he go on Sunday? And the reality is, and the answer to that, whether satisfying or not, is that when you have someone with that many comorbidities who also has depression and clinical diagnosed depression, there is a paralysis even in the face of medical emergency, which goes back to why you should never give him. He had no business being injected at the clinic and then being told to go show his friends in the first instance. So he shows up at the ER in Albuquerque, and a really on-the-ball emergency urologist sees this, and he goes nuts. Because this is now at least the second patient that he's seen for Numel in this kind of condition. And he's like, fuck this. These are his words. I mean, he is livid. He gets on the phone with them and he starts yelling at them. I'm not your I'm not your emergent care option while you close down. And by the way, there was no doctor ever in Albuquerque. They were in Beverly Hills and Las Vegas, doing Beverly Hills and Las Vegas things. And they only staffed it with a PA. So he was pissed. He calls the medical board and reports them. And that's when our local counsel, Lori Benko, she got the case, and she got it as a pure medical malpractice case. As we started litigating, we find out that actually the business model, this business is run by two physicians, two non-physicians, and their model is to just basically open clinics up all over the country to feed people these drugs, to just, you come in, and it wouldn't matter what your comorbidities are. I could come in, I would get the same triple package as someone who's 70, as someone who's 18, and they deal with compound pharmacies. So they get it from the compound pharmacy and they sell it directly to you. So it's really nothing more than a pill mill, but they're an injection mill. And so that was the fraud that was uncovered. And we had all of their advertisements. They were doing things like advertising, like the 11th caller or something would get free drugs and stuff. And I'm just a normal person living, a 49-year-old guy that's lived on this earth for that many years. And I'm like, that can't be legal. You couldn't offer the 11th caller one free week of OxyContin. Why can you offer the 11th caller one free injection into their penis? It's a drug. It really sounds unethical to me. And so with that case, the case is being litigated for years, a couple of years, and they're going to mediation. And this happens kind of a lot in my practice, where I'll tell referring lawyers, look, if you can settle it at a number you like, there's no reason to bring me in and split half the fees just because I'm sitting there at mediation. So go to mediation, see if you can resolve it. If you can't, then I'm available to take the case. So at the time, one of my partners, Nick Rowley, has the case, and one of his partners, Teresa Bowen Hatch, goes to the mediation. The plaintiffs offer $950,000 to resolve the case at mediation. That the defense rejects it and says $500,000. So then it comes to me. Nick calls me up and he says, dude, I need you to try this case. And I'm like, okay, no problem. What happened at the mediation? Up the defense offered 500. We said 950. They said no. And now, Alex, I'm in a great position because I'm like, okay, fuck them. I'm not negotiating from here. They had their choice. I don't have any discussion about that. I'm trying this case to verdict. I'm going to see what I can get. And if I beat $950,000, I'm a hero, right? That's awesome.
Yep.
So basically, I fly into Albuquerque. Never been. It's really cool. I think it gets a bad reputation post Breaking Bad, but there's a lot to like about Albuquerque, and it's also like just a short drive to Santa Fe, which was cool. I'd never been there either. So we're staying in Albuquerque, and in 2 weeks of this trial, first of all, everything's going right. I don't know a thing about about New Mexico law. Never read a thing on it, but I'm arguing all of the motions in limine. And the New Mexico law mirrors federal law pretty well, mirrors other jurisdictions I'm admitted into. So I know what to do. We're winning every freaking motion. Every motion we win. We then start jury selection. Jury selection was a little rough because most jurors were like, so, and the client at that time was like 65, right? So we're like, ladies and gentlemen, here's what happened to his penis. And most jurors were like, what's he doing messing around with his penis? Like, he should know better, injecting his penis. And I was not unsympathetic to that. That was my first reaction too. I'm like, he injected what? Where? This sounds crazy. He did it himself. I mean, I could never imagine putting a needle anywhere near my penis. Like, that would be terrifying to me. But people do, I've learned. So the jury was not with us in jury selection. He was unmarried. He was messing around with testosterone and his penis, and they were immediately suspicious. It's a very Catholic, Christian Catholic jury pool, which fortunately I'm Roman Catholic, and I can really relate to a lot of those jurors because I was skeptical of shit too. I'm like, and then what's he doing leaving the clinic with a boner? It's just like, come on. And then he doesn't go to get help. It didn't make much sense to me. So we finally pick our jury, and then for the first time we're showing up, and I'm going to do the opening statement. And that's the first time I got to see these doctors, these owners of New Mail, in person. And they all were like lined up along, behind their counsel. And of course, they had a bunch of lawyers, and they're all lined up. And I look over and I'm like, holy shit, these did not look like doctors. Like, this did not look like, St. Elsewhere or Grey's Anatomy or anything like that. If you were casting like an Eastern European bank job heist movie, with like the guys with the 5 o'clock shadow and they're ripping cigarettes and they all look kind of shady, and that was who I was looking at. I was like, oh, you guys are fucked. Like, because during jury selection, the defense attorneys who are all very buttoned up, I mean, they're talking about the role of the doctor and, there's doctor judgment and all this stuff. And I'm like, you all don't look like doctors. And half of them weren't. They looked like fly-by-night hucksters that would, open and close tattoo removal places in the desert. All right, I'm in there. So we give an opening statement. And you start to see the jurors like, yeah, that's not good. We don't like that. All these things, and we're using their New Mail advertisements against them. I'm playing their ads. I'm showing one of their advertisements said, and I'm gonna paraphrase the idea, but it was basically like, if it said like talk therapy, question mark. And then it had a picture of a vagina on it. And they're trying to say, like, if you're getting engaged in psychotherapy or talk therapy, you're a pussy. And you need to come to New Mail where you can get the testosterone and you can get the penis injection and, put the male back in your life. And all their commercials were like that. Like, they would have women sitting in a coffee shop and it'd be like, one woman would come in like exacerbated, and she'd be like, my boyfriend went to new male. I can barely stand. I mean, and
Oh,
yes. And so this, Catholic jury who had previously looked at my client with scrutiny,
oh my
like,
God.
what's he doing, is now looking at this like, I mean, it was extraordinarily anti-female. It was like it was extra, and I get it. Like, I'm not a prude. I understand how people talk
For
and
sure, for sure.
stuff. But it's also like, you're a doctor.
Yeah.
Like, come
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
Let have some respect and decorum. And it what it really did was it emphasized that what was being provided here was not medical care, it was drugs.
Mm.
You went in, you got evaluated, and you got your package of drugs, and they got their money, yeah, and you were out the door. And that's really what happened. And so each day we just won every hour of every day to the point where, in the end, we asked for $412,000. We had a compensatory, or 412 million, 412,000. I actually,
I thought that's what you meant.
I said that during rebuttal closing argument. And my partner, Nick Rowley, was like, I was going to tell you, I was going to stand up and tackle you because you said 412,000. So I don't know why I just did it again, but that's so weird. But then I had it written on my PowerPoint, and it was an obvious, some kind of slip. But so it's so odd that happened here.
Again, yeah.
But we asked them for 412 million, and their verdict was 412 million, $5,100. The $5,100 was the amount that Michael Sanchez paid to New Mail for the concoction of drugs. And the
Wow.
$100 was the consultation fee. So the jury, even without us, we didn't even think about it. Frankly, if you're talking about $412 million, you're not like, and that consultation fee too, that we want that back. But God bless I mean, that's how incensed they were
Yeah.
about what was going on with this, that they returned the $5,100 on top of 412 million. And it was not only was it complex, because you have all of the defenses that you'd have in any medical malpractice case. It's our medical judgment.
Mm-hmm.
To my surprise, injecting the penis is allowed. That is standard of care medicine for erectile dysfunction for someone that has, failed Viagra and all this other kinds of things. And again, it's medical judgment. You don't have to fail Viagra. They can just give it to you.
Mm-hmm.
And, also, we send our patients out with all of this information to go to the hospital. Not only do we do it, but it's ubiquitous. You can't watch NFL football on a Sunday without knowing exactly what to do if you have an erection that lasts longer than 3 hours, because every other commercial tells you what to do. Like, in other words, this is so commonly known in the atmosphere, and there's no reason why he wouldn't have gone. Like, he caused his own demise. If you have an infection and the doctor has told you, look, if this starts getting green and bubbly, you need to come in, and it starts getting green and bubbly and you don't come in, that's going to be on you. So they had all of those defenses, and they tried all of those defenses. I mean, they argued zero liability, and they argued zero liability, and then in closing they said, well, you should give him $1 million. It was very weird. I'm not making that up. It was Nick and I looked at each other and we were like, did you heard that, right? Like, and I'm like, yeah, I heard the same thing. And so that really allowed me to shove it up down their throats in rebuttal close, because it was such a cynical, in keeping with like just terrible business practices, terrible medicine. It was, quite frankly, disgusting. And my father's a physician. My mom is an ICU nurse. Every single person in my family was a medical provider. I was the black sheep.
Yeah.
into personal injury law. Every Thanksgiving, I mean, you know, because you're a medical provider, every Thanksgiving was, you know, these goddamn lawyers are killing the country. You know, we gotta do something and all this stuff. And ironically, now my dad's retired, my mom's retired, and they live, you know, 4 miles as the crow flies from me. They're the first ones that are like, you know, what happened in this case? Tell me what, can you believe that doctor's saying that shit and did that? And so it's interesting how like the perspective changed a little bit. But I guess my point of saying that is, you know, I'm not anti-doctor at all. I'm not anti-medical provider. I'm pro-doctor, pro-medical provider. The amount of cases that, you know, if you think of medical care, how much medical care is going on in this country right now? Hundreds of millions of visits, of follow-ups, of actually good care. The percentage of things like this is small, as we would hope it would be. But the problem is that even when those things are identified, even when the bad apples are identified, there is an industry around it that says, no, you got to turn the apple. You know, never mind this worm sticking out of it. You just turn it this way. It looks fine. Looks fine to me. You know, so they circle the wagons around these really bad actors as opposed to weeding them out or helping weed them out. And up until post-trial motions, you know, NewMail was still holding on for dear life because it was such a profitable business model. And you have, you know, not to get it off on a tangent here because we're just having a discussion. One of the critical points of failure in that I learned from this case is, well, who were the NewMail doctors, right? The NewMail doctors, this Dr. Sandra and Dr. Feliciano, were ER doctors by training. And ER doctors are wonderful, right? But most people don't know that's kind of an hourly position. Like you are clocking in and you are clocking out and you're getting paid for your time in the ER and your efforts in the ER. And yes, you know, you can make a very good living, but that is more lunch pail work than I think the public knows. You know, the public's like, well, you're a doctor, right? You must drive a Porsche and, you know, live next to a country club. And not that you can't, but those ER docs, like they put in time and effort and energy, you know, in sometimes a losing battle for their paycheck. And so what happens is, of course, you can get burnt out doing that. I mean, you know, infections, gunshot wounds, heart attacks, they're not breathing. Like there's a life, you know, there's a life cycle, I think, for a lot of docs in how long you can do that. So what's happened is there's this other newer concierge medicine concepts, and particularly with, I mean, it's probably the same thing with you know, female cosmic what do they call it? Cosmetic procedures, injections, fillers, all this stuff.
Yeah.
Well, there's an equally, you know, really valuable. If you tell men that they can have bigger muscles or a bigger penis or their penis is going to work better, I mean, they're going to pay and they're going to pay cash. So you look at your life in the ER, which is stressful and difficult, and you're not getting paid the same as someone who's you know, putting in silicone breasts in Beverly Hills. What can you do? Well, you don't need a new certification to transfer into male wellness. You just need a sign that says Dr. Keith Bruno, MD, is now a male wellness expert, right? And I can get you testosterone and I can get you injections and I can do all this stuff. And here's the best part. I don't even have to be there. I can be in Beverly Hills while a PA is staffing my clinics in Oakland, in, you know, New Mexico, in Nebraska, in places where doctors won't go. And it just becomes a profit center for me because I have my FDA license, I have my DRE license, I can do whatever I want, you know, and that is attracting the kinds of people that I described sitting behind their counsel table when I knew I was going to win, because a lot of these docs need business partners to open up new facilities, to sign the contracts. And so they go in 50-50 with these people that don't have the patient's interest in mind. And that can really, that provides a when you hear about a $412 million verdict, you say, well, man, that's outrageous. No penis is worth that much. I disagree with that, by the way, for the record. But you could think that no penis is worth that much, but really the verdict was a product of this kind of burgeoning fraud that is going on, not just in medicine, but around the country, where the individual is kind of lost to what we're going to profit at the individual's expense, right? And I see it, with things like Uber. You see it with, the disappearance of small businesses and stuff, because there's bigger businesses that are just swallowing them up. And you could say, well, maybe that doesn't hurt people in the same way that giving them injectables hurts them. No, not in the same way, but it can destroy people nonetheless. And I think that when the jury understood that this wasn't just about this man's injury, this was about the business practices of this quasi-medical institution, it justified such a high verdict.
There is so much to uncover there. That's one of the most fascinating stories. Sad, but fascinating too. I just talked to Ion Alexander and Ryan Krupp, and we've talked about private equity in healthcare, and we've talked about these nonprofits that act like charities, but they make crazy profit, but they're not protecting their staff. Like, it's insane. And to the point of, like, with medical malpractice, and you're the second attorney that has told me about this, like, Apple analogy. Clancy Boylan, when he did a case, he said, listen, guys, for the record, I'm not going after the nurses, the hard working nurses that are short staffed. I'm not going after one bad apple. I'm just saying that there's not enough apples. And he said, like, the jury chuckled and stuff like that. And so I liked your analogy about, no, just twist it. It looks fine. It's good. Like, ignore the, I loved how you said that.
Wait till PE starts rolling up pediatric dentistries across the Midwest. There's an end to that, right? And it's not patient-centric.
Yeah.
Like, and we all know it, which is part of the frustrating parts. Right now in California in particular, Uber is, and I used to be a customer. I mean, it is the most pernicious business model for the driver, for the customer. I mean, Uber used to be an affordable alternative to a taxi. Then they killed all of the taxis.
Yeah.
And now it's neither affordable for the consumer or for the driver. I mean, and we knew this was coming, right? So when PE gets into, well, they're already in. I mean, when they get into rolling up these, odd specialty clinics that you like, pediatric dentistry or something like that, you're like, what could go wrong there? It's like, well, a lot.
Yeah.
And it will.
Yeah. One of the attorneys said it's a lottery, and not in the good way, because these private equity investors, they're coming in, and especially with hospitals, there's monopoly hospital organizations. And there's a case where they got funding during COVID, and their PPD or whatever was falling below 3 and everything like that. And, like, the safe ratio is like 3.0 and above. And basically, instead of going after, like, the nurses, what happened to the client and stuff like that, they started looking at the attorneys. They started looking at, you had received like $2 million in funding. Where did that money go? You know what I mean? So the question, and then you start looking at that. Are there unethical business practice going on? Like, really, our job is to review the records behind the scenes and build a story of what the facts say. But dude, a lot of these people are stuck in tough places. Like, they are in horrible positions. And so, and I tell them, I say, a lot of the attorneys that I work with, they're not just going after, or they're not even just going after, a provider or a nurse. Like, they're going above the heads. And because there's a lot more issues above their heads that are making way more profit. And so
There's a really interesting fight or attempt going on right now.
Mhm.
Shutdown, which is the push to keep medical funding levels at COVID level funding. Well, there's a reason why. It's because if it's not funded at that point, then like if the money was actually being used at those funding levels at that point, um, then and being used appropriately, then if the services are no longer needed, the money would not be needed at that level. The problem that is going to be discovered, in my view, and it's just a layperson's view, but if, on the other hand, the services remained relatively static or within an area that were below the funding level, but the funding level disappeared nonetheless, and then you go back to a lower funding level, the channels from which the money was disappearing are going to be exposed. And that's going to be a big problem for some people. And, my dad, when he finished his medical career, he was vice president of medical affairs at a large hospital system called St. Luke's in Allentown and parts of Pennsylvania. And the medical funding industry and the streams of money, especially because, Medicare and Medicaid have become so huge, it requires like a full-time, advocate, accountant, it's big business right now, I guess I mean to say.
Keith, tell me, was there a pivotal moment in your trial experience that changed how you approach cases? So often I hear failure is our greatest teacher. What was one of yours and what did it teach you?
Sure. Pivotal moment was and continues to be um, no questions, meaning in criminal law, you get comfortable with asking no questions of a witness because it will hurt you worse than the answers that have already been given. And it's just that what it translates into is a comfortability of silence, a comfortability in I know what I need to do, and I'm confident that I've thought this through, and we're going to stick with this plan. And that can serve you a lot in life because it forces the mind to think of things before they happen, and it forces you to be confident in yourself. We're all humans, and we all get nervous at cocktail parties when there's better looking people than us there. We get nervous in court when there's silence and no questions. If you can look at a witness and say, I don't have any questions of this witness, it is incredibly valuable for all of the other, the energy that you otherwise give off. There's a flip side to this coin, but in the case that we were talking about, Sanchez, the penis case, I made the decision early on that I wasn't going to show the jury pictures of the penis because I had focus grouped it a little bit, and most men thought it was terrible. Most women had questions, and they'd say things like, it doesn't look like it was very good to begin with. They were like, it's a penis. I mean, it's not a very good penis, but they did not see the pictures in the same way that men saw the pictures. And so what we decided was, the defense certainly thought we were going to rush to shock the jury with these penis pictures because they were shocking to me. But instead, I found that when I described the injury, and I described it as the worst penis injury you've ever seen, and a terrible penis injury, and it's so bad, I'm not even going to show you the pictures. If you want, we can get them back for you in evidence, and they never asked for. Now, when you did that, what happened instead was theater of the mind. And if I said, Alex Woods, this is the worst penis injury you've ever seen or ever thought of or will ever see, Alex Woods pictures in her mind, whatever that is, whatever that looks like to you, that's what you picture. If I say, to Steve Johnson, Steve, I got to tell you, this is the worst penis injury you've ever heard of or ever seen. He pictures something. Now, his picture, if we were to draw it, is I guarantee it going to be different than yours. But it's still the worst you've ever thought of, and it's the worst he's ever thought of. So the jury's not back there debating about the degree of terribleness of this injury. They all agree it's the worst. It's the worst anyone's ever seen. And as we went through the trial, we dared the defense a little bit. Are they going to show them? But they didn't have the balls, because what are they going to do? They're going to show it and say, look, it's not that bad. It still was very bad. So they never showed it either.
Well,
and that is, that is a very similar aspect to, are you confident enough to not ask any questions? Are you confident enough to not just filibuster every room that you get into because you're a lawyer and lawyers are supposed to talk? Can you listen? Those are all important things, I think, about being a lawyer, and the lessons that I learned in criminal law. And I'll just give you, I'll concretize it for a second. In criminal law, a lot of times you'll have multiple defendant cases, right? 3 guys rob a liquor store, let's just say, all right? So you're representing one guy, there's a lawyer representing another, and there's another lawyer representing another. And this has happened. It's happened to almost every good lawyer that I know. The DA puts on a witness, and the witness testifies that she was in the liquor store at the time, and she's very, very nervous and very scared, and everything happened so fast, but she was sure it was 3 guys, and they were about 6 foot, and 2 were black and 1 was white, whatever. And you're looking over here, and 2 were black and 1 is white. But that's all she says, right? And so, it comes to you, and if it's me, and I say, I don't have any questions to this witness. She hasn't identified anybody yet. And then another lawyer will stand up and he'll say, ma'am, so what you're saying is that you don't recognize any of these people here as the people in the liquor store. Her answer now is, well, come to think of it, they do look, they look very familiar. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm 90% sure that those guys were the guys. What did you just do? What did you just do? Why did you need to ask that question? She went from not having identified any of your clients to you goaded her into a position because you couldn't resist. You couldn't resist getting up there and going, so what you're saying is that these aren't the guys. Well, the standard is not, is she 100% sure? Maybe that was the standard in her mind, and she didn't want to make a mistake. But quite frankly, that just makes her a more honest witness. And you snatch defeat from the jaws of victory very easily when you do something like that. So we've all seen that exact thing happen. So sometimes the best thing you can do is shut up, even if you're a lawyer. And it's so hard to do because your client's looking at you like, you couldn't think of anything to ask this person? And it's like, no, I could think of a million things. I'm never at a loss for words. I'm strategically not using those words. There's a difference, So that's an important thing that I've learned, and I think more lawyers would be well served. You never heard of a lawyer losing a case because they just didn't ask one more question. Most jurors have gotten it, and they, when a lawyer says, Your Honor, I'll be brief, they know you're not going to be brief, or I just have one more question. They know you have 7, and nobody's ever lost a case by not asking those last 7 questions. Just be confident enough in yourself to shut up.
Brilliant. Do you feel like when you started into trial, and not just for this case, but just your trial history, was psychology a big part of it? Like trying to, okay.
Yeah, I'm not smart enough to figure out other people's psychology.
Yeah.
It's funny you asked that because my success and my results have gotten much, much, much more when I went from being a resting metabolic rate of an 8 on a 10 scale to a 3. And
Mm.
that was a psychological choice. It was a physical choice. Uh, and what it became is being comfortable in my thoughts, in my messaging, and not having to persuade people, not having to beat them over the head with everything. I can remember real quick. I'll give you a story. I wanted my teeth, or I got my teeth knocked out in a fight when I was in college, and I don't have like if you watch like The Bachelor or something, like every contestant on them has just these beaming white teeth, and I like that. I want that.
Yeah, yeah.
So I went to my wife, and I was like, I'm going to go to this cosmetic dentist. And so they did all this stuff. They came home, and I had this package that would have been like total smile makeover. And they had molds, and they had, before and after digital images and something. And I showed my wife, and she's like, "What are you doing? You're going to put in a set of choppers here. You're going to look like some fake newscaster. Like you're fine. Like the way you are, the way you look, the way you talk to people, the way that you relate to people." And I'm thinking, and I'm like, there's a vanity side of me that really wants those big old gleaming, straight across, looking, everything looks, exactly like this. There's no crooked, nothing.
Yeah.
And I thought long and hard about it, and I thought, well, what I do professionally is I just try to relate to people. And, if I were to start getting plugs and, this some kind of tan, I mean, you could tell I'm translucent. I'm the enemy of the sun. And these white choppers, I mean, it would look good on Instagram and in pictures, and I'm sure I could look that way, but I don't know that I would be as trusted, and I don't know that I would be me. I mean, there would be a different person looking back in the mirror. And so the psychology of just learning that, you're okay, as yourself. And if you think about it, this profession, if I told you, close your eyes, think of the 20 uh, best Mercedes-Benz dealer managers in America. Okay. What do those people look like? What is the top 20? Well, you'd have somebody from Newport Beach and Miami and New York, and they would look like that. They would be these tall guys with a tan, even in the winter, the choppers, the suit, like that's shiny and shit. That would be the Mercedes-Benz, best Mercedes-Benz sales guys or managers in the country. They would have a look. If I say close your eyes and think of the top 20 trial lawyers in the country, it doesn't look anything like that. That person can be a woman, that person can be black, that person can be white, that person can be fat, that person can be thin. There's no archetype. I mean, I'm thinking of a person right now who might be 5'5", a gentleman, one of the best trial lawyers in the country. You don't have to have this look, so it must be something else. So psychologically, there must be something to do with being your authentic self, even if that's you 20 pounds heavier, or, with a crooked bottom row of teeth, or whatever it is, imperfect hair, all that kind of stuff. And so psychologically, when you understand that, and that's no bullshit, that I can name you the top 20 trial lawyers in the country, and they all look nothing alike, and they're all not cut from the same cloth or anything like that. If you understand that, then you go, well, I could be one of those too. And I don't have to go rearranging who I am in order to be that. I could just maybe show up with a good case and explain to these people, like they're my neighbors, um, why what happened was wrong and how to make it right.
I think that is so true. And I think it's hard at first to really find your voice or find your like your true authenticity, because it's scary at first to be like, look at all these people. Like, you're comparing yourself to really successful people, successful trial lawyers, successful legal nurse consultants, successful entrepreneurs, right? And you start to, and I did this. I don't know if you did this, but I would like kind of copy their mannerisms or maybe what they did. And it felt like so disingenuous. But you really don't really find your true, like for me, I didn't really find my voice and lean into who I was until the more reps I did. And the more I talked, the more cases I reviewed, the more like I would do these interviews. Was it like that for you? Like the more reps you got in, getting in front of jurors, the more comfortable and the more of your voice you found?
So I had the luxury of when you're a public defender, or when you're in criminal defense, your reps are off the charts.
Yeah.
But it's a very different task than being a personal injury lawyer. So I had to start over. Your tone, you're not fighting the government. You're asking people for money. You're asking people that don't have money to give money to someone else.
Mm.
That I needed a lot of reps at. And to your point, I've seen I've seen this happen all the time. I went to the Jerry Spence Trial Lawyers College, 10 years ago, 11 years ago, whatever it was. Um, and Jerry Spence, legendary American trial lawyer, wore cowboy boots in the courtroom, wore cowboy suits, wore a jacket with tassels. So not everybody, but so many people, particularly guys that come back from Spence, first thing they do is buy a pair of cowboy boots. And they go into court wearing these goddamn cowboy boots.
Yeah, yeah.
We just met, but if you saw me, I mean, I'm from Michigan and Philadelphia. I look as out of place in cowboy boots as I do in high heels. I'd be walking around, I can barely, put the feet together on these things, and you look like an imposter. You know
Yeah.
why? Because you are. Because Jerry Spence is a cowboy who lived in Wyoming, and you're not. You're from suburban Philadelphia, So
Yep.
it's like that. You do see that where people try to mimic and, well, this worked for this guy. Like, he wore a red tie every day of jury selection. I'm going to wear a red tie. We love that shit because
Yeah.
people want this comes from a good place of wanting every advantage and a bad place of thinking you can't get there on your own. Like whatever you do isn't good enough. I I speak for a living. I hate my voice. When I hear my voice on this podcast, I won't be able to listen to it. It's
I'm
high
the same
pitched.
way.
It's, I'm like, oh my God, I wish I had, one of these good voices where, you could you speak from the diaphragm. I wish I could do that, but
You
I
actually
can't.
personated that pretty well.
Well, yeah, that'll last like 6 seconds, and then
Right.
I'll go back to this. And
I'm the
so
same way.
I don't like it, but it's the only voice I have. So you have to make peace with it and just go, look, people, maybe it's not going to be somebody's cup of tea. Um, but what can I do about that?
Yep. That's so true. You will find more people that follow you for being you than not. And if you're not their cup of tea, that's okay. Because like it's your life. No, they're not going to remember you in 10 years, or then maybe they will, but are you going to remember them? And when
That's true.
you're
And
like when you're surrounded by your family at the end of the day, when you're 80, 85, like are you really going to give a crap about what other people thought? No.
no, but
They're
the
going to probably
best
wish you
advice,
less. Say that again.
the best you said not your cup of tea, and like this is like we've spoken for the last 10 years together. So the best advice I can give anybody is do not try a case alone. If you can try a case with another person, your chances of winning skyrocket. Why? Because you are not everybody's cup of tea. You have 12 jurors from 12 different places that like 12 different sports teams that think, three of them think I'm an asshole. Four of them think they remind me of their, son-in-law who they actually like. If you can try this with another person, no matter their skill level, that brings another voice, another perspective, I think that's so valuable to do because they might very well be the cup of tea of the people that don't like you in particular. And if you can it's like in politics, broaden the tent, broaden the tent, broaden the tent. If in court you can broaden the tent even by 2, 3 people, that can often mean the difference between winning or winning big and not winning at all. So I think it's hugely important to try cases with other people. Even if it's their first case, you're there, you can help them along. But get someone with a different voice than yours in the trial, you'll see your results go skyrocket.
That was a golden gem right there. I cannot talk more. I cannot talk highly enough about mentors or people who've done it before you too. It's the same thing you just said. Like get people, whether they're new or not. But I have such a thing about mentors and people who've done it before you because you can shave off years of learning curve. Now, I'm not saying shave years off reps, but I am saying shave off years of, hey man, I did that, don't do that. Like, just trust me because I've been there, done that, and I lost, or I learned the hard way, or I lost a huge deal. And so I think that was golden there. In your experience, what's the most overlooked factor that can completely change the trajectory of a med mal or personal injury case? You choose
Okay.
one.
So I think the most overlooked factor in evaluating a case, particularly med mal, but also applicable to personal injury, is getting experts involved early. This can be pre-lit. I am an expert in how to present essentially a finished product to a jury. I am not an expert at all in how to plant a garden or how to recognize whether the proper garden has been planted. In other words, the beginnings of a lawsuit. What do we have here? My firm gets medical evaluators. We get accident reconstructions. We get police procedure experts, all involved pre-lit. I understand that it's expensive to do, and you can't, we would love to have our toolbox, the biggest toolbox on every single case. And I'm not naive. I understand that can't happen. But what happens is that in a medical malpractice case, when you get a medical evaluator to really see, all right, here's what went wrong, and let me explain it to you. Okay. Of course, it has value for that case, but it has a much greater value of you are learning from them. You are learning how hospital systems work. You are learning how a decision-making tree is supposed to be done. You are learning what's not there. Wait a minute, why isn't this there? And that helps you in every other case. We are lucky, right? Because we have a very narrow focus, right? There's med mal, there's, sexual abuse cases, there are, kind of run-of-the-mill personal injury cases, and that's it. And so if you can bring in experts to help you in the early going, you have literally just started ahead of your opponent by leaps and bounds. And this is not something, in my view, and I think this is important. I might have should have started with this. My firm, if we're spending the money, I'm going to be in the room and I'm going to learn because I'm going to get my money's worth. So if I have to cut a check for $10,000 to learn that the case is not good, I have at least learned why, and I can then better evaluate things in the future. If I learn that it is good, then I can take that knowledge with me in the future because I'm going to encounter similar cases within those 3 lanes. Those are the 3 kinds of cases I take, right? So I'm going to get my value out of that dollar. I'm fortunate because we have, at any one given time, about 20 to 25 cases in various states, right? That's very little cases. And that's of course by design. But if I'm going to, if I'm going to sign up a case, I'm going to put experts on it almost immediately before I'm writing a demand letter. Now, in almost all cases, I'll know what the insurance level is. So I'm not out there hiring experts on a case when there's only $30,000 in insurance, and I'm hoping it's an open policy later. You of course have to use your judgment with all of these, but this is the idea. I once read a really cool article, and it was on why England, the inventors of soccer, football, they're not very good anymore, and this was at a time where they certainly weren't as good as Brazil. And the author of the article basically took apart this premise that English soccer is played as hero ball. There is a hero who will take the ball and beat multiple guys and score. And, they're this stoic English hero. And that player usually is a striker or, maybe a midfielder or something like that. As where the Brazilians, they play the beautiful game, and the defenders are fully capable of doing anything on the field, and they're playing as a team. And this teamwork that is obvious if you watch Brazilian soccer, or that is oftentimes absent from the English game, even though the English invented it, the Brazilians perfected it. The teamwork is why they perfected it. And so I'm a huge believer that starts in the beginning. A lot of trial lawyers, once it's like we have that trial date, then it's like, all right, let's assemble a team. I need this guy. I need that guy. No. This should happen and be in place from before you get it. And your team in your law firm should be kind of a well-oiled machine, as from the defense to the midfield to the strikers, should be able to get that ball in the net for you. So I wish I knew the name of the article. It was just fascinating about human behavior and culture, and how English want to win so bad, but their culture is kind of holding them back. And I think everybody wants to win. Everybody wants to have, a giant verdict and a giant settlement and all that. But it might be the culture that's holding you back.
Mm. Yeah. Keith, finally, where can people learn about you, other attorneys? How do they connect with you?
Sure. Believe it or not, the easiest way is my cell phone, and then brunonalu.com. Now, everybody gets the Nalu part wrong, but it's BRUNONALU.com.
Okay. That was awesome.
It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure meeting you. Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm sure this down the road, I might invite you to do another one, and it might be a full-blown podcast, or who knows.
And we put on a bunch of seminars. We do Trial by Human and Big Sky and stuff. So I will reach out to you as well. We have a lot of people in both in your business, or doctors, medical providers, come and talk about their services to other lawyers from around the country as well. So that it's one thing to say, assemble a team. It's to someone who's never done that, they're like, what team? Where do I go?
Yeah.
Oh, team. It's like Michael Scott declaring bankruptcy. I declare bankruptcy.
Yeah.
I'm assembling a team. And that's I would encourage people to reach out for that as well, because having a diverse experience in the law, I can often go, oh, I know a guy, or I know somebody who might know somebody who can help you with this.
For sure. Yeah. Well, Keith, seriously, thanks for getting on. We'll have another one probably in the future. So
awesome. It was a pleasure, Alex.
Yes, vice versa. So have a good Thursday, and we'll talk soon.
Take care.
Hey, if this episode changed the way you think, or gave words to something that you already practice, subscribe so you don't miss what's next. And if you know someone who makes high-stake decisions, maybe solves complex problems and works in gray areas, send this episode their way. Between the Lines is for people who care about how judgment actually works. We'll see you on the next one.